Hey there, I'm estate planning attorney Paul Rabalais, and in this video, we're going to talk about whether new estate tax law could be passed that actually gets applied retroactively. All right, so a number of people have asked me either in person or they've emailed me or they've asked questions of me in the comments to perhaps a YouTube video or a LinkedIn post. They've asked me whether the estate tax law, a new estate tax law could pass during 2021, for example, and whether, if it is passed, whether it could be made retroactive back to deaths that occurred or large gifts that were made before the legislation was passed during 2021, again, retroactive back to January of 2021. All right, so let's take a look at that. Here's what we know right now. Right now, the way it is on the books, if somebody dies in 2021, they have an estate tax exclusion amount of $11.7 million. Going to be President Biden's estate tax proposal, a little bit vague, but it appears that he wants to reduce the estate tax exemption from its present number of $11.7 million down to $3.5 million. And now that the Democrats will control the presidency, the House of Representatives, and the Congress, it kind of looks like they're going to be able to do whatever they want to do. So what if, here's the question, what if the president and Congress act and change the estate tax exemption during 2021? The way I see it, there's three different scenarios that could occur. They could make that change and create new legislation during 2021 that takes effect at one of three different times. They could make legislation and changes in 2021 and make it effective for January 1st, 2022 moving forward. Or I suppose they could change legislation in 2021. Let's say they changed it in July of 2021 and make it effective for gifts that were made and deaths that occur after the legislation was passed. So for example, from July of 2021 moving forward. Or, this is what everybody's asking me, could the president and Congress change the estate tax exclusion amount, which is currently $11.7 million? Could they do that in, let's say, July, and make that change effective back to deaths that occurred or large gifts that were made back to January 1st of 2021? So those are the three scenarios. Let's take a little bit closer look at them. First, let's look at the option that Congress and the president act during 2021 to reduce the $11.7 million exemption back to $3.5 million, and they make it effective as of January 1st, 2021. That one just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's going to impose some hardship on people. So for example, if somebody dies on January 30th of 2021 and they have an $11 million estate, when that person dies, the survivors are really going to be saying, whew, okay, so-and-so just died, he had an $11 million estate, the law in effect at the time that he died, he had an $11.7 million exemption, there's no tax. But then later in July of this year, Congress says, we're going to reduce the $11.7 million exemption down to $3.5 million, and we're going to make it retroactive for deaths that occur on or after January 1st of 2021. Now that means, though, that estate of someone who had died 4 or 5 months before has to cough up another, let's say roughly $4 million, depending upon what that estate tax rate might be changed to. That estate's going to have to cough up $4 million of estate tax that they didn't think they were going to have to pay as of the date of death. So, and to make matters even worse, let's say someone in January 30th of 2021, they're alive and well, but they want to go ahead and use up their estate tax exclusion amount, their gift and estate tax exclusion amount during their lifetime, so they give away $11 million during their lifetime to the next generation. And so they do that because they think legislation is going to change. And so they don't owe any gift tax because of that. they used up their exemption, but they don't owe any tax. And then later in the year, Congress acts, no, we're going to change it to $3.5 million, and we're going to make it retroactive back to both deaths that occur and gifts that are made on or after January 1st of 2021. Then that person who made the $11 million gift, thinking that there would be no tax because he was using up his exemption, would have to cough up, that donor would have to cough up an additional $4 million to the IRS for the privilege of being able to make an $11 million transfer to their donees. So, boy, that just sounds harsh. Could they do it? Well, they control everything, so maybe they could, but it just doesn't sound practical to me. So let's look at option number 2, which, let's say President and Congress act during July of 2021. They change the $11.7 million exemption back to $3.5 million, and they make it effective for deaths that occur and gifts that are made on or after the date that the legislation was passed. So if it was passed on July 31st, 2021, and somebody died on August 15th, 2021, they'd only have a $3.5 million exemption. But if they died on March 15th of 2021, they would still have their $11.7 million exemption. So that's a tough one for me to envision as well, because in the 3 decades that I've been helping people transition and make the most of what they leave behind to their next generation, the estate tax exemption amount or exclusion amount, whatever you want to call it, has always been the same for the entire calendar year. So, for last year, $11.58 million from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. Every year, it's that same exclusion amount from January 1st to December 31st for the calendar year. But could the President and Congress mid-year change the exemption amount and make it effective as of that mid-year date that the legislation was passed? Who knows? I guess they could. And if you think that's what's going to happen and you have some significant assets, it might behoove you right now, before that legislation gets passed, to go ahead and make the large gift and use up your $11.7 million exemption before Congress brings it back to $3.5 million. If all of that happens and they change it mid-year and make it effective from the date the legislation passes and beyond, you could save for your family maybe $4 million of estate tax by making the appropriate transfers before that legislation would pass. And then the last of the 3 scenarios, if Congress and the President change the estate tax exclusion amount from $11.7 million to some lower amount, I'm suggesting $3.5 million is what they might change it to, is to make it effective for deaths that occur and for gifts that are made as of January 1st, 2022, moving forward. That would seem to make the most sense. It wouldn't impose an undue penalty on people who had died or estates of people who have died before the law change. And it would keep the estate tax exclusion amount consistent during that calendar year for 2021. So, however, I would say if mid-year 2021, Congress says, okay, we're gonna let you have your $11.7 million exemption for all of 2021, and then starting for gifts and deaths that occur January 1, 2022, moving forward, that exemption is going to come back to $3.5 million. You're likely to see a whole lot of year-end gifting being made at the end of 2021, so those wealthier folks can use up their $11.7 million exemption during their lifetime instead of waiting to use a $3.5 million exemption when they pass away. Again, could be about a $4 million tax savings, maybe even more if the gifted assets appreciate after the gift is made. Could be significantly more than a $4 million tax savings. So what's my prediction? My prediction is, the estate tax law is likely to change. The estate tax exclusion amount is likely to be significantly reduced from its current $11.7 million level for 2021 down to maybe $3 million, maybe $3.5 million. Who knows? But the more important, not more important, but just as important is when does that new law take effect? My prediction and what seems to make the most sense is that it would take effect for deaths that occur or for gifts that are made starting January 1st, 2022, moving forward. But don't take my word for it. What I would do if I were you is I'd subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell. That way you won't miss anything, because as soon as something happens, I'm likely to know about it, pretty quickly, and I'll, be able to share that information with you so that you can take the appropriate action to protect what you worked so hard for and what you'd like to transition on for that next generation or so. So hope that helps. Have had some questions about it. There's a few different scenarios on what might happen. 2021 is going to be an interesting year. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.